assumptions clear. What basis are you working on? So I'm going to do that. So next slide. Hello? No, back. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Right, this is the first fundamental assumption. As a training manager, now there are some very funny reasons why human resource managers invest in training. I've seen some very funny reasons. One time, when I was the head of learning services at Digital in Europe, Compaq, the computer company, called me and asked me for a quote to train 200 IT guys as network administrators on Cisco Top Gun. Now, this costs $14,000 and takes 2 weeks. And they had 200 of them. I said, this is, I was interested. It's good money. But I did ask the guy the question, why do you want to train 200 IT guys on Cisco? And he said to me, he was the human resource director of Compaq France. He said, because we're going to fire them. And in France, it's crazy, yeah? But in France, when you have what they call a social plan, you have to give people the best possible start in their next life. So that's what he was going to do. But I'm sure those engineers would have preferred to have the $14,000, really. So the investment, hang on. Can you hear me? Yeah. The investment really should be to produce better performance at work. That should be the key assumption. If you're doing it for other reasons like reward, or you're going to fire them, or because the law says you have to, there are better ways of doing it than training, okay? So really, if you're going to focus on an investment in training, it should be to fix a business problem and increase performance at work. Okay, next slide. Knowledge is not competence. In the French language, which I work in a lot, they often confuse these two things, knowledge and competence. And can we go back to the slide with Einstein? I didn't know how to answer it. Okay, that would be a problem. Okay, so that's where we should be focusing our learning experience. Next slide. The other fundamental assumption I make in my projects is, and this is a very good reason why we have to use e-learning and not just the classroom, is use it or lose it. If learners don't use what they've learned very quickly after they learn it, they forget it, they lose it. So for instance, if you have been asked to train, let's say, 10,000 users on a new SAP platform that's coming in, you need to do that pretty much the day they're going to start using it, or just the day before. So we need to bring the learning as close to the work as possible. So again, this is another fundamental assumption I'm making in my projects. Next slide. So that's why we have to use IT. Next slide. Now, I've seen some spectacular failures in the world of e-learning. Next slide. Or next, yeah. If I take one project I was allowed to analyze was Microsoft's Online Institute. Microsoft at one point created a huge problem. They created a situation where there weren't enough system managers and application developers on Microsoft. 9 out of 10 jobs in Europe were not being filled in this profile. So they created Microsoft Online Institute, MOLI, which was an e-learning repository where people could go through the whole course and get an MSCE or an MSD certificate, and thereby get more money. Now, anyone could sign up for this, but of all the hundreds and hundreds of people who signed up and paid their money to get into MOLI, 25% just registered and paid their money and didn't do any learning at all. Next. But 75% did get on and do something. Next. But only 15% certified. Okay. Now this damn thing cost $50 million and we're trying to fix a big business problem, which was the lack of IT skills at the time. So what went wrong? Next. Next. So I was part of the committee that was looking at, what went wrong. Now the first assumption was, next, it must have been the technology. It must have been, maybe the wires were too thin, In those days we didn't have broadband everywhere. But every user got the thing on CD and could do it at home. So it wasn't that, actually. Next. So then they said, was the content okay? Was it complete? Well, yes, they'd spent $50 million. The content was fine. It was all there. It was everything you needed to get an MSc or an MSD. Next. So then they said, we know. People can't learn from machines. They need teachers. People can't learn from machines. But that wasn't the problem, actually. And so I did a lot of analysis on this. And this is what I came up with. Next. The things that were missing, what I learned from that MOLI project and others like it, was that first of all, the learning goals were not clearly defined. When you put your e-learning system in, it's very important that your learners know why they are doing it, okay? There's a very famous coach, baseball coach in New York called Yogi Berra. Have you heard of Yogi Berra? He said some hilarious things, but he once said something very clever. He said, if you don't know where you want to get to, you will end up somewhere else. Right? Now this is an epidemic in learning. People ending up somewhere completely different. Next. Now, once you set your goals, it is very, very important that you measure the progress the learners are making. Okay? Now, because what you measure is what you get. Did you know that? What you measure is what you get. And once I was invited to go to Australia and do talks on performance management, and I landed in Melbourne very early in the morning from Singapore, and on the newspaper stands was the headlines, and it was exactly about this. The Australian train company in Sydney had become private, and now passengers were customers, and they did a customer satisfaction survey. And they got the answers back, and the customers in Sydney said, the trains are clean, everything is great, but you're never on time. We don't know whether the train that came at 9 o'clock was the 8:55 or the 9:05. We never know. So the human resource manager of the Australian train company set up a cash bonus for the teams for every improvement between timetable arrival and departures and actual arrival and departures. The day I arrived in Melbourne that morning on the headlines, now the customers were really furious because the trains were not stopping in stations to pick up passengers. The trains were coming, the doors went, da-da! They were on time. So remember, what you measure is what you get. So once you set those goals, it's important to measure, because if you measure something, you'll get it. So that's really good, actually, because you can use that in a very positive way. But if you measure knowledge, and believe me, I've seen a lot of projects where everyone's being measured on what they know at the end of the project, you've got something completely useless, because knowledge on its own is useless. So if you measure knowledge, that's what you'll get. You'll get people passing exams, and that's all. Right, next slide. Now, this is important as well. What went wrong with MOLI was that there was no selection. Anybody in this world could have signed up to MOLI to become an MSD or an MSCU, paid their $15 and done it. And of course a lot of people were attracted because you could get a very good job and very good money if you did it. But a lot of them hadn't got a cat in hell's chance of finishing that. They didn't have the right skill set or makeup or personality to become a system manager. So when you do your e-learning project, you make sure that the learners who are going to be in it have been selected because they are appropriate for the goal that you've set. They're part of the problem that you're trying to fix, and it's not just anybody. Because the trouble with e-learning is, Perry's going to talk about MOOCs later on, is that it can be for absolutely everybody. So, okay, we'll make it for absolutely everybody. That's the first factor of failure if you do that. Because if you want someone to climb a tree, you want to hire someone to climb a tree, it's better to hire a squirrel, a squirrel. You want a little guy like that, a little squirrel with a bushy tail. A squirrel, it's better to hire a squirrel than train a turkey. Okay? Now, a lot of turkey training is going on. See it all the time. Because the selection hasn't been done, and because we haven't done the analysis of who needs what, because it's all too easy just to stick it out there. Right, next slide. Now, the Microsoft people said, oh, okay, people can't learn from machines, you have to have a human. Actually, you do, but the assumption was the human had to be a teacher. Actually, it does not have to be a teacher. The most important human being that your learners need is somebody who gives them a moral support, somebody they respect, almost like somebody that they're doing it for. Now, very typically, this would be the team manager or the department manager. Okay, so leaders are really important in this. And that's the best person. You don't actually need teachers at all, but you do need the managers to be seen to measuring progress, seen to be caring about these learners and caring about their progress. Next slide. So management attention. Now, as you can tell, I am British, right? Do you know what we eat for breakfast in England? Eggs and bacon. Eggs and bacon, right? So eggs and bacon. Now, in an eggs and bacon breakfast, right, you've got the chicken, right? Yeah, the chicken with an egg, right? That's a contribution. The chicken is contributing to the breakfast. But the pig, right? He is committed. He's committed. Now, again, another problem that I've seen with managers and learning programs. They come up to you, the project manager, go, oh yes, we really want to contribute. And they'll come and do a nice speech to all the learners at the beginning of the program, and then disappear, I don't want chickens, I want pigs. I want pig managers to be absolute. If this is going down, they're going down with it. So I want those managers implicated and committed from the start. And I'm going to show you how I do that. Next slide. The first thing is to decide what is the level of performance we're looking for here. What is it? And I'll give you an example that I worked on. A very nice Belgian man came to see me one day called Herman Ogle, and he managed a massive systems integration organisation down in Valbonne in the south of France. And they did all these big projects, and they had $800 million of revenues at the time. And he came to see me because his profit was only 40. And Herman and I, we looked at the problem together, and we discovered that project management was the key competence going on. And what he had got was projects that were overrunning on time, overrunning on budget, and overrunning on specification, because as engineers, they love to add in bells and whistles and do clever things, because you can do that. But it was costing him his profits. So we set a goal for his project managers, all right, which became our mantra. It was called 3 times 0. 3-0. 3 zeros. 0 overrun on budget, 0 overrun on time, 0 overrun on spec. And then we looked at how to get that. And obviously, training these project managers was going to be key. And that became the goal that we set. Now, if you look at the effort to get to that 3 zeros, 5% of the learner's effort was the part, I know how project management works, I know what a critical flow path is, I know the principles. And then the next 10% was, okay, and I can now do a simulation, I can do Simultrain, I can do a little mock-up project and do a mock-up project meeting and so forth. Right, but where's the real effort to get to the 3 zeros in reality in Valbonne in the south of France? Next slide. Is adapt and apply. Now, I'm sure you know this because this is human life, but adapt and apply. 85% of the effort in learning to get to the real target is on the job, in the office, doing it for real with what you learnt in the classroom. Now, I would take a bet with you, though, that your budget is 85% spent here and 15 there. Am I right? It's too easy because this is the formal training, this is the informal training, this is so much harder to manage and it's so much harder to invest in. But this is where you want your people, your warm bodies. This you can do with e-learning, no problem. Next slide. So, this is my recommendation after 20 years and 2 million learners. One, with those pig managers, with your pig managers, do the analysis to define what are the 3 zeros, what is the business problem we're fixing, what's the standard we want. Next. 2, okay, measure, okay, where's the 3 zeros, where are we, okay? What's the gap? And that's the gap you're going to fill with the learning. Next. Next. Then you use teaching methods, I know and I can do, and as I said, e-learning was brilliant. At that time, even then, that was in the early 90s, we used e-learning, we used Simultrain to teach them how to manage projects with a simulator. And then we coached, next, we coached and tracked them all the way to that goal of 3 zeros. And within 18 months, we hit it for all of them. And the profits went up to 200 million. Great, we'd fixed the problem. Now, coach and track to the goal. In Valbonne, Herman had 2 major department managers. One was called Alan Atwell, he was English. The other one was called Maxime Boulard, he was Lebanese. Maxime was a real people guy, and his people loved him. And when he was trotting around the corridors, he'd say to the guys, how are you getting on? And Alan was more concerned at the time with the religious war of 2 platforms, VAX VMS versus Scroll Unix. And he would have a debate with the engineers every day about which was better for their projects. Now, what was interesting was that if you look at that graph there, one lot of engineers came up in 6 months and hit 3 zeros here. The whole lot were trailing. Do you know why? People say to me, oh, well, they were idiots. These were the stupid ones. No, they were all equally talented. They worked in the same building, they had the same tools, and they had very similar projects. And the difference was those 2 managers. Maxime's people came up real fast because he paid attention to them and he cared about their learning, and he'd ask them, is it getting better? Is your budget now better because of the course? And the Atwell guys took much longer because they didn't have the same management attention. So even if you've got really quite crappy content and not very good technology, and you haven't got mobile learning and social learning, don't worry, because you've got one important weapon, which is management attention, and what you measure is what you get. Okay? And if you select your project managers at the beginning, so make sure you've got the squirrels, make sure you're training squirrels, yeah? And you've got a manager who's paying attention and who is committed to the business result, your project will succeed. Even if your content is a bit boring, even if your delivery times are a bit slow, and even if it's not on the latest mobile. Next. Now, next. And one more. Thanks. So I found a really good way to do this, I learnt this from Peter Senge, is to look at the organization systemically. What is the value-adding system? Because if you can find out what those learners are supposed to be doing that adds value, you'll be able to focus your investment. So this slide really is about how do you get to that ROI? How do you hardwire? How do you make a hard link between the investment in training and business results? And this, for me, is the answer, is that you get those pigs, those managers, into a room for half a day, and you say, what do you want from this group? And then you come up with something like 3 zeros, as an example. What goes in? Well, what goes in at the beginning is all these customers with their project requirements, they want new transaction systems, they want a new customer database, or whatever, IT problems here. Here's the team programming things, documenting things, handing things over, and out here comes something that works, and here we have, say, 3 zeros. From this, we can work out what they do. Now, this is really important. I figured that it's not skills, knowledge, and behavior, or competence that adds value. On its own, if you just have that, nothing happens. Okay? It's when people do work, activities that transform things from A to B, that's where the value comes. So it's a good idea, if you're putting in needs analysis and you're putting in competence management into your e-learning system, to use activity as the key dimension and not say knowledge. Now again, 90% of the projects I see around the world have used knowledge as the thing that they're measuring, as the competence management standard. Now, knowledge has a shelf life of about 6 months. So that's like building a house on sand. was I discovered that most companies do the same activities. The activities can be a good generic list that will last you for hundreds of years. So that's my advice, and that helps you hardwire. And this workshop that I do takes about half a day, and it sets the project on the right path, okay, because it deals with the initial assumptions I told you about, that we're trying to increase work performance, that we're selecting the right target, that we have the right measures, and that the managers are absolutely committed to it because we're talking about shareholder value. Okay, next slide. If you are going to measure things, again, instead of measuring knowledge, David Norton, a long time ago, came up with the Balanced Business Scorecard. These are the 4 dimensions of it. So you still have the shareholder value, bottom line, but are we learning faster than the competition? That's a good thing to measure. Do our customers like us? You could have a really nice balance sheet, a really good bottom line this year, and your customers hate you. You won't be in business next year. So that's a really good thing to measure, to do with learning. And also, is there a key process that we have here? For instance, I'll give you an example. If you're a bank and you do loans for people to buy houses, the Crédit Agricole, they currently have a 2-week process whereby you come along, here's the house I want to buy, here's my dossier, can I have a loan? And they meet, and then they have various reviews, and in 2 weeks they will tell you. But the Halifax Bank in England will do that in 4 hours. Okay? The same thing. So these are measures that you can, business process, the drivers of your business, are you improving them? These are all dimensions and measures that you can apply to your learners as a result of the program that you've put in. Okay? That's a good suggestion. Next slide. I'm not quite sure what I've got now. Okay, stop. So then but at the end, because I'm out of time, I think. Yes. I had some examples from IBM, because IBM taught me a lot too. I learned a lot from Microsoft, I learned a lot from IBM. And IBM did a big e-learning program for their basic blue management training. And these are just the numbers. But you can have my slides, the numbers are on there, what they saved. Anyway, basically they proved the point. E-learning saved them 85% of their budget, basically. Now, is there any questions? Because I'd much rather you talked than me talking, actually. Any questions? Yes, hi.
I'm not sure if I got really the idea of activity profiling.
Right.
Could you elaborate?
Yes, I could.
You meant
Yes, no, very, very good question. Right, the activity profile. So what I did was, actually, you'll understand this perfectly. If you look at a team, the things they do, they go and analyse customer needs. They write proposals. They give presentations, okay? Now, those are activities. So let me just give you an example. Give a presentation, all right? Which is what I'm doing, yeah? That's an activity. So I would have a matrix of activities and skills, knowledge, and behaviour. Skills, knowledge, behaviour. Now, if I take this activity, number 1, give a presentation, the skill, for instance, one skill I would need is active listening. So I would need to be active listening. And sensitivity towards others. Knowledge, I would need to know, let's say, about PowerPoint, for instance. And behaviours, I would need oral presentation skills. And behaviours is I would need sensitivity towards others. Okay, confidence. Okay, so then what you do is, so you build a matrix, you've got your activities, and then you've got this dictionary of standard knowledge, skills, and behaviour. And actually the only one you need to change on a regular basis is the knowledge, because obviously it's PowerPoint VX, and then it's, what was that thing, Prezi, or whatever. That's the bit that changes there all the time. So I've got, if you want, you can contact me, I've got a dictionary of activities that you can apply to any business organisation. Okay, where this doesn't work is in education. Everything I'm telling you is about e-learning in the enterprise. In education, it's a whole different, because that's entirely about knowledge, really. But this is about business and getting things done and increasing value. Yeah? Does that answer your question? Great. Okay, so it's a matrix, yeah? Activities, skills, knowledge, and behaviour. And that's an example. You know it's an activity when it's got a verb in it. Okay? That's how you know. It's got a subject, object, and a verb. Any more questions? Okay, right. Thank you very much. End of slides.